recently did a video on why you should vote conservative and why you should stick with Trump. I think there's a lot of people flailing a little bit right now because Trump's supposedly in trouble by not declaring what documents are declassified and whatnot. Those documents were taken from him, and for him to have some kind of magic list where he declassified stuff is BS. And we really need to stick to our guns and realize that the left side of the spectrum plays games. And one of the things that I think hurts conservatives is the idea that libertarianism is the better option. Freedom from everything, freedom from government control. And I used to feel that way myself. But I think the best summation of it is one of the quotes under Steven Crowder's video that he just put out that I'm going to do some commentary on right here in a moment. But I answered a guy that he posted the following. I think the modern day notion of libertarianism has been skewed. Some say that libertarians can be left-leaning, which I think is a fallacy. I have called myself a conservative libertarian for years now because I genuinely believe in both core philosophical tenets. Conservatism and libertarianism feed off and complement each other very well, not to mention there is a large overlap between the two. And I said, I don't believe it is skewed. I feel the same and have traveled the exact same road as Crowder, but must say libertarianism is a cop-out, particularly when dealing with a two-party system. You're wasting your time waiting for enough people to support libertarian candidates and picking off mostly conservatives when you spread a libertarian message. Sorry, but if you really look at it, you're hurting the case, particularly now where the Dems have moved so far left, there's a huge hole where centrists are supposed to reside. And I firmly believe that, and I think that's the key part of what we're dealing with all of this.
I'm a recovering libertarian. Now, if you look at what I believe and you look at where I would sort of line up on policies, I certainly would lean much closer to the libertarian side of the spectrum, but I don't like using the word. The reason for it is when you have throughout time like Greg Gutfeld, Bill Maher, Glenn Beck, and the Reason Magazine people all claiming to be libertarians, what does it mean? Yeah. And then when you watch the libertarian debates, it's just a bunch of people with lisps arguing about weed and cryptocurrency.
A lot of people arguing about smaller government removing all these restrictions, which is not some big sweeping thing that can happen. Even if you were to elect a libertarian president, which is a real far stretch, because you barely have any self-identifying libertarian candidates that make it into Congress. And then if you take that to the point of going to the presidency, think about all the agencies and everything else like that that are political at this point, and then trying to say, well, I want to slash all these things. I want to cut all of you out of your jobs. Libertarians often come with, I want to close down the IRS, and I want to close the ATF and the FBI. That's all great. You need to do that in Congress. You need to defund them through some of the political maneuvers that the Democrats have used recently. The Reconciliation Act, for example, where you're taking the money away. You're voting to take the money away. Not as a president trying to say, well, I'm just going to close these agencies. That's not really how that works.
So I don't think there's a whole lot there for me. But I do believe that originalist sort of federalism, conservatism, certainly lines up more with libertarianism. But we do find ourselves right now at a point in this country where it can't possibly function. And let me explain to you why. Libertarianism is a preventative measure. It works if you set it up from a framework of small government and you maintain it. It is not a recovery. It is not a curative measure. And right now we are at a point in this country where a preventative measure like libertarianism, you can't fight something aggressive, meaning thousands of pages of new legislation each day by saying, well, there shouldn't be any. I understand that, but there is. And it almost never gets taken off the books. And the idea of free markets, which I support, free enterprise, I support. I've always said I'm not the party of big business, the party of small business. I'm the party of good business. The problem is there really are no free markets in the biggest industries that exist in the world today. And really, when you look at one of the few legitimate purviews of government, it is to protect us from threats, both external and internal, and to ensure that everyone is playing by the rules that might harm somebody.
Yeah.
And certainly now when you look at the organizations, we'll get into big tech, big banks, airlines, health insurance companies, they are causing direct harm to the American citizens, and they are doing so with carte blanche from our federal government.
Right. Well, too big to fail. I mean, you're supposed to have a level playing field so that people can come in and compete, and that's what keeps goods and services more affordable, and it gives everybody the opportunity to innovate. Once you have these big companies set up and the government backing them up, that's no longer the case.
What is libertarianism? Okay. Have a definition here. A political philosophy maintained.
Before he goes into this too much, I just want to comment a little bit more on that. We've gotten to where businesses ingrained with government and doing the government's bidding, and it's very difficult to step in at this point and say, well, we need to have a smaller government that's less involved, and we need to make all these businesses go their own way and do their, be free in the market, because they've taken their freedom in the market and used their size and their power and their ability to put money towards political causes and control the narrative to just crush the opportunity for a small business to thrive and get to that size to compete. This whole idea of make your own Twitter, make your own Facebook is ridiculous at this point, even for somebody like Elon Musk, who has the richest man in the world. Trying to even buy Twitter is a difficult task. He's got the money for it, and look what it's turned into.
That all persons are the absolute owners of their own lives and should be free to do whatever they wish with their persons or property, provided they allow others the same liberty. There's nothing there with which I disagree,
right?
To be clear. There's a moral psychologist, I guess is his title, 𝓟𝓛𝓔𝓐𝓢𔔔, had an interesting hypothesis on sort of how libertarians think. Here's a clip.
There is a big sex difference here. Men are generally higher on systemizing. Women are generally higher on empathizing. And what we find is that libertarians are, in a sense, the most masculine out there. Libertarian men are the highest on systemizing of any of the three groups, and they are the lowest on empathizing. Same thing for women.
Okay, now, first off, let me just say I disagree with that as it applies to conservatism. I understand the idea that libertarianism is, people might be low on the empathy scale. I will tell you, I am a conservative, I'm a constitutionalist, I'm a federalist, because I am hyperly empathetic. I look at the people of Venezuela. You look at the people under Stalin's regime. You look at the people under Castro. Currently, when we're talking about Venezuela, take your pick, China. Yeah. I look at them and I say, it's never possibly worked. So you may see in the short term saying, well, you don't want to extend a hand? No, I see what handouts lead to. And because I don't want to see the destruction of not only society, but the human spirit, I'm a conservative. I think it's the most empathetic worldview that you can possibly have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the only one that allows for compassion, because government is never compassionate, because they're dealing with numbers that are too big to be compassionate. You're not dealing with one, you're dealing with thousands, millions of people, and so you can't be compassionate with that.
And that's why you see leftist individuals, they donate far less to charity than conservatives. The single two biggest determining factors, I think it was Brooks wrote this, a book called Who Really Cares, if I'm not mistaken. Guys in the edit bay, you can let me know if that's right. Discussed who gave to charity. And the single biggest determining factors were your faith, religion, and your political persuasion.
Yeah, and it was
Christians,
massively
it was
different.
A huge difference, because you have Nancy Pelosi saying, no, the empathetic thing is to have open borders and to give all the money to government. And
the left thinks that government should take care of people, and they want to force the government. They think of government as like the people. And I think conservatives they're a little more realist, and they realize that, well, I can use my money locally to help people that are close to me and causes and stuff that I believe in, and I put my money towards that instead of some big organization or big government that's going to waste it. And it's going to start programs that never amount to anything and cost more and more money. Cost everyone has to be forced to pay into them. I mean, you have government trying to force abortion things upon religious organizations.
Less than 1% to charity, and go weed whack my lawn. That's how it's rules for thee and not for me.
Right. Well, but it assuages their guilt, right? They're like, oh, I can just, pay taxes and do this. The government's responsible for doing this. The charitable view is, I'm responsible for helping my local community, so I'll give to charity locally,
right,
and let these guys go and do the work, and I'll also volunteer.
Here, let's go to this, a few examples. You are at a point now where the libertarian argument can't apply when you're talking about big tech. When you're talking about these giant non-government entities that have more influence over the government and over your life than even the government would be justified in exerting. Let me give you a few examples. Okay, Facebook. Start with Facebook. They are an arm of left-wing government, just to be clear. They don't allow any opinions that contradict what? Government agencies. Or like the CDC, or international governing agencies, like the WHO, who, by the way, don't acknowledge Taiwan's existence. Hold on a second. Here, is it political? Is this a private industry, or is it political if they are taking marching orders from the WHO, who does not acknowledge Taiwan's existence? Because, by the way, acknowledging Taiwan's existence might be the reason for World War III.
WHO considered Taiwan's membership.
Come again?
Hello? With the
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I couldn't hear your question.
Okay, yeah. Let me repeat the question.
No, that's okay. Let's move to another one then.
Right, because I'm actually curious on talking about Taiwan as well, on Taiwan's case.
You know what the most fun part is about not being able to post information that can't contradict one of those?
I'm going to guess it's not fun, but go.
It's when the WHO and the CDC don't agree. Then you can't be like, hey, the WHO said, because the CDC's like, no, we don't agree, or vice versa.
Right.
Like,
Where that populates around, all the social media companies have a different perspective of what they'll allow you to talk about, not allow you to talk about. And one of them's listening to one, which contradicts the information of the other, and you get banned, and doctors get banned. And then those people are not reinstated once it comes out that they were actually correct or they had a point in asking the questions that they were asking. But it's too late now. They're already banned from social media and they'll never come back again.
But Zuckerberg also emailed Dr. Fauci personally in March 2020 to collaborate with the NIH to ensure, quote, people get authoritative information from reliable sources. Not to mention, of course, Facebook's decision to ban the 45th president until at least 2023 for public safety concerns. What is a public safety concern? We don't want him to win. We don't want him to win.
really don't want him to win.
And if you don't think that those places are the public square and you're not on Twitter, you're not on Facebook, you're not on YouTube, and you're just texting with your friends on your cell phone, and you think that there's not any communication and news being propagated in those places, then you are just lost to the world. You're not involved in anything, and you probably don't have any perspective on politics as it is, because anyone that watches just the nightly news and misses all this other stuff that's on social media and big tech is not involved in the world.
So, was this private enterprise? Is this free market? When people say, go create your own Facebook, how do you do that? How do you do that when the head of Facebook, Meta, is directly emailing Dr. Fauci, the highest paid government official who's never been elected? Think about that for a second. Dr. Fauci's never been elected by you. He's not even your representative, and he's talking with Zuckerberg to give them marching orders who can control what you say. Nothing about that is emblematic of a constitutional republic, and nothing about that can be solved through a preventative measure like libertarianism. It no longer applies here. By the way, Facebook, Alphabet, Apple, Amazon, they've donated millions of dollars to Joe.
I think the biggest point he's trying to make is that once these institutions get too big to fail and they're too involved in the government and they're too large and the government is too large, it's very hard to come back with the idea of like, let's start over by wiping them from the slate and wiping all these laws from the slate and just getting rid of all these political organizations, you know, the ATF and all this other stuff. You have to start by shrinking them, making good laws. You know, a lot of these, it's not that we don't want these institutions to exist. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to break them up. And sometimes you need regulation to set things in the right direction. And we have laws on the books that are not being enforced, particularly with monopolies. These companies don't see the way monopoly was meant to be applied because they control things in different industries that are related. They're not the same industry. You know, it's like Amazon. They're an online seller, an online marketplace, and then they basically have gotten so many people that have to sell there that it's hard to find any place else to sell because that's where everyone's going to look for goods. And how do you regulate that and say, well, they shouldn't have so many people selling there when all the people are going to gravitate that because it's the place? And then Amazon is able to control all the advertising. They're able to put products that compete with people on their own platform. And then if you're a person that's selling on that platform and Amazon has all your stats and has all your information, all your customer lists, and knows what your customers want, what they're complaining about, and they can do it cheaper because they're a larger company and they have more resources to get into that market, how do you compete with that? That'd be like somebody in your own business that's the star salesman is now going to go and start their own company and start selling their, goods that compete with yours. It makes it difficult to imagine how you regulate that and how the government can get in there and do that. The only thing that you can do at these points is break these things up and then make sure that you regulate the control that they have between each other. If Amazon creates a shipping, empire that essentially gives them the ability to ship everything around the world at a faster and a cheaper rate with low costs, and they start using self-driving cars and all this other stuff and eliminate people, how would you create a business that could compete with that starting from the ground up when they've already got billions of dollars to put into creating those kind of structures and creating that self-driving car? You're just not going to be able to. And then you'll have no way to compete in that marketplace. You're talking about self-driving cars that would not need somebody driving them, that needs to eat and rest and gets time off and can strike. That right there is gonna devastate the shipping industry if Amazon continues the way they're going and then takes control of it and then turns it into self-driving vehicles. The shipping industry will just be destroyed. Amazon will control all of it. And they started as a bookstore. I mean, think about that. They've gotten so big, they started as a bookstore, and ultimately their direction is going to have them taking over all of the shipping, probably across the world.
Biden and Democrats in 2020. Not to mention, of course, you have what? Zuckerberg and Twitter, and to a lesser degree, Google, YouTube, censored the Hunter Biden laptop story. Not only did they censor it, they censored the story while allowing political opposition to paint it as Russian propaganda.
Right.
And then said, whoops, we were wrong. Is this a free market? Is the true libertarian view? Well, Facebook can do whatever it wants. Well, because when you're saying Facebook can do whatever it wants, the libertarian in you is saying Dr. Fauci, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Kamala Harris, 𝓟𝓛𝓔𝓐𝓢𝓔, they can do whatever they want. You're not talking about a private entity.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because Mark Zuckerberg, his solution to say, we're not as bad as Twitter over there. We didn't actually ban the story and make them, go silent for 10 days while their account was banned. We just shadow banned it so nobody knew that we were making it to where you didn't see it pop up in your newsfeed. Yeah. And so it was a significant reduction in the spread of this information that potentially, according to Pulp,
at least the outright ban let you know that they were interfering. And we only just recently found out the FBI had gone to them and said, hey, this is misinformation. Make sure you handle it as such.
Polls, not me, could have changed the outcome of an election.
It absolutely would have changed the outcome of the election. According to Biden voters.
I get us banned so many times.
According to Biden voters, 12% of them, I believe, I'm going by rote, said it would have changed my vote if I knew about the Hunter Biden laptop story. That switches all of the swing states.
Yeah. And
how does libertarianism fix that? Let's go on to another example. So now you have the biggest organizations, the biggest companies that have ever existed throughout the history of mankind. The West Indian Trading Company, I think, employed like a fifth of population Earth. Not as powerful as the big tech companies. And by the way, they all email each other. Do you think they accidentally all banned Alex Jones and Donald Trump within 24 hours of each other? Come on. It's not a conspiracy if it only requires 5 people to make it happen. So let's go to example number 2. Banks. Hey, banks, I agree with you. I agree with you that banks should have the right to do what banks want to do. They should be. But banks are not separate from the government. If you look at banks and you look at hedge funds, they manipulate the economy, for example, to short stocks. Before we even get into the bailouts, remember Robinhood? Remember they stopped the purchasing of GameStop stock just because Redditors were boosting it? Now, you might not like what Redditors were doing. You might not. But guess what? That was a free market. It was a bunch of people who came together, and then the bank said, well, hold on a second. This is too powerful. So we need to make sure that someone steps in from regulatory affairs to stop you from playing the game that we have already rigged.
Well, and they sided with Wall Street. They sided with a hedge fund and several hedge funds, really, that were shorting GameStop and driving the price down. And basically people said, that's not fair. We don't like that. And Robinhood steps in and says, it doesn't matter if you like it or not.
Right.
We're going to put a halt to this. So nobody can sell their stock or buy whatever the parameters were. You just can't trade this stock anymore. It's like, for no reason.
And who do you think the government sides with in all these cases when it comes to businesses, big businesses that they cannot fail? We've had the auto industry bailed out, banks bailed out. They don't bail you out. And when you start playing the shorting stock game and all that other stuff, these businesses don't like it. They don't want their big money people that are involved in those institutions to lose out on anything.
Other than somebody was losing billions of dollars that they liked.
Yeah. So we didn't stop it. You just can't trade it. Well, what else would I do with stock?
It's just sitting there.
These same banks, by the way, donate overwhelmingly to Democrats. The myth of the big bank, the fat cat Wall Street banker, right? Republican. It couldn't be further from the truth. Certainly in the modern era. Maybe once upon a time. Not anymore. So let's look at hedge fund managers. You have Sussman, Snyder, Eichner.
And we know
donated
that
$70 million each. Street backed Biden to Trump, 70 to BlackRock.
We know that Wall
venture
Street
capital from Revolution
donated heavily to Democrats. We know that a lot of the Biden White House is involved with everything from BlackRock. You know, if you're not paying attention to BlackRock, that is one dangerous organization. You're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar valued organization that's trying to push ESG, which is all of those social justice warrior, beliefs. They're trying to push them onto businesses as part of their day-to-day operations so that they become a rating system that they can use to rate based on your support of climate change and other things like that. They want the value of those things to be tied in with the company's value. That's pushing everything to the left. Everything to the left. BlackRock is dangerous.
A consulting firm, Precision Strategies. These are the biggest companies that exist in the world.
All advisors to White House.
I should say they formerly employed also Jen Psaki, CIA Deputy Director David Cohen, Director of the National Intelligence Agency. Across the board, you have people appointed to unelected roles in government, and sometimes that even involves roles in your intelligence committees. Yeah. The CIA, the FBI. Think about that for a second. Think of the path from working for a company that gives $74 million to a politician.
Follow the money. They want you to rent. They don't want you to own. They want you to borrow money as much as possible. That's how they make money. They want to take your money and that you put in the bank and invest it and make money off of that. Lend it back to somebody else, make money off of that.
But here's the thing. Greed cannot harm you from big banks if they don't receive bailouts, if they don't get preferential treatment.
And get
the
bailouts.
Less red tape there is, the harder it is for them to get ahead. Why do you think these giant corporations always support big government policies? Because it eliminates the mom and pop competition. Yeah. Again, is your libertarianism, how is it going to solve this here? And if your answer is go in and just slash up, it's not going to happen.
Free market.
That's not what happens with our legislative process. How do you fix it? Libertarianism right now, it's a preventative measure that cannot offer solutions. So, you have special interest groups like Planned Parenthood, $45 million to back Democrats in the 2020 election. Maybe that explains why in 2019 all but 3 Democrats voted against the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. And that's one of the few bills that is aptly named, just to be clear.
Yes, it means what it says.
Like the Green New Deal, like, what is that? I don't know what that means. Well, that's by design. The Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Here, I want you to picture what it actually... Yes. Yes, babies were being born alive, and they were being allowed to die. Wasn't happening in huge numbers.
To starve to death and things like that. Not get any care.
But it was enough if it was more than 0, and Democrats voted against it.
Wonder why.
All of them. All except for 3 with a conscience. Now we go on to Visa, MasterCard, American Express, who, by the way, have received billions of dollars in bailout money. They're now all going to track gun purchases using a new purchase code, which, by the way, could be provided to the government, considering that private data has been given over to the government by these companies in the past. Let's look at airlines, one of your favorite businesses, I'm sure. They're beholden to the government after receiving over $54 billion in bailouts, and I think that's even just the most recent round with COVID-19 relief. Hey, hold on a second. Now that we're back in full swing, has that been passed on to you? Let's think about it. Libertarians, right? The free market. Do you get a bag of peanuts? What about the checked baggage fee? Is your airline experience now more pleasant, or at least as pleasant as it was pre-COVID, or does it still suck? Because once the government steps in and says, all right, we're going to give you this money, it comes with strings attached, guess what? It never gets better. It only gets worse. I have a lot of libertarian friends, and I agree with the principles of it. I'm just saying that pragmatically it doesn't apply here. What do we have? We have collusion between big tech, and what do I mean? The most powerful companies that have ever existed. You've got Facebook, you've got, Meta.
Whatever.
Like we don't know what that means. So you've got Meta, Twitter, YouTube, Google, Amazon, Apple, right? Okay. We have collusion between them. All the banks, all the big credit card companies, multiple corporations and special interest groups, airlines. You're a citizen. Where do you go if you want to live in a free market? Well, just don't be anywhere in big tech. Go create your own. Well, just don't do any banking with big banks. Go create your own. Well, just don't use any of the major credit card companies. Just use cryptocurrency. Yeah, that'll never be regulated if it becomes as powerful as fiat currency. Airlines, go buy a plane. The point is we are at a point where it's not something that you can simply solve through free market alternatives because they have been locked down, and that can only happen through the corruption that has taken place between the government and these corporations. And I get it. The irony is not lost on me that we do need some fighters in government to try and roll this back, because it cannot simply be solved through the free market at this point. It doesn't exist.
And that's exactly the point. I think a lot of it stems from the idea of free market, free market. Libertarians want free market, treat everybody equally. Our government has not been treating everybody equally for a long time, and big businesses get special treatment. Big businesses are not people. There are a lot of times a big group of people. Think, for example, unions. Just take that, where you belong to a union, and then your union decides they're going to give money to Democratic candidates. You know, that's not an entity. That's a single person. It's a whole bunch of people, and yet it doesn't matter what the makeup is. The leadership decides where the money's going to go for something that you're involved in a union. Perhaps to have a job at a place, you have to be a part of a union. It makes it for the average person looking at it to say, well, we want all these fair libertarian values, but aren't they also constitutional values? Aren't they also conservative values? Why would you not espouse that you're a conservative and drop the libertarian message? Because all you're doing is picking off candidates that everyone wants, the free market to work. But you can't go on with the idea that all this stuff has to be abolished, because that's just not going to happen. You got to be a realist too. And you have to be a realist from the standpoint of your candidates are not going to get elected. People aren't suddenly going to vote a libertarian president in. That's going to change everything. One thing at a time. Don't try to take a huge bite out of it with attacking everything and attacking both sides with saying, well, you're just not letting everyone have their rights. We know that. Conservatives know that. Democrats should know that. The old description of a liberal was a lot more anti-government and all this other stuff, but now it's just completely tied with it. There's a big hole, gaping hole. There's no center anymore. The left has moved so far left that even left of center now is very far right. And so if you're a libertarian, what a true libertarian typically stands for, welcome to the far right. Welcome to conservatism. You can't describe yourself as a libertarian anymore without really making a joke of your politics and your attempt to win back a free market and free speech and equal rights for everyone. It just ain't going to happen. Join the conservatives. Let's vote these ding-dongs out. Let's get some people in there, particularly in November. We need to hit the government agencies hard with investigations. Right now, that's the biggest thing. We need to get these government agencies that have a lot of power in line. That's the first thing. The FBI and the DOJ need to be reined in, because they're the ones with the guns. They're the ones that can bring charges, not the Democrats in other positions of power. They can make rules. They've already made them. They can sway us towards being a green country, get rid of fossil fuels, which I think is the second thing to go after. But we need to take care of that arm of the government that is the intel. They have the guns, the tanks. We need to rein all that in. We need to rein that leadership in that wasn't elected, that are bureaucrats, that are partisan. They need to be taken care of first. So libertarians, come on over to the conservatives. Let's take care of this.